Hello, hello, Mike. Mike Hughes, how you doing today?
I'm good, Nicholas. How are you?
Good.
Good to see you
So
again,
yeah,
man.
yeah, good to see you. So really excited to have you. As you know, this is a website about Hillside Homes and really a resource for people who want to design and build Hillside Homes. So who better to speak to us than a general contractor who is also currently working on building a Hillside home. So as we mentioned, Mike Hughes, Distinctive Development's the company. Why don't you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit, I guess first just about the company, what you do, kind of the mission, and just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, distinctive development is a portion of the company JCS West, which has kind of got a long history in the residential and commercial world. The distinctive development branch was started when Jake and I became partners back in 2019, and I was on the residential side, he was on more of the commercial side, but getting pulled back into the residential world. And our two experiences and backgrounds and personalities really jived well. We had some other people we were working with and for, and decided me more importantly was to leave my current position, which was more on like the sales and support side from the design and implementation of hardscape, stonework, things like that. And I was working with all the architects, designers, builders in Arizona, and previously had worked in construction, but he was getting pulled into the residential world on some custom build stuff for some clients he had worked through and known through commercial and past history. And we decided like, yeah, let's go more towards that residential role. So Distinctive Development was born and basically to execute that.
Nice. And
Mhm.
so now you said 2019. So you're in year five, six. It's going well?
We basically cut our teeth on that portion of it right during COVID. So I don't, some people would say that's a negative. I kind of saw it as a positive because a lot of our friends and colleagues in the field were experiencing the abrupt, supply chain issues, labor issues, just it was a very unknown time, and we were like, well, this is just normal for us from that perspective. Um, and so, we were like, if we can make it during this tumultuous year, you can make it anytime. And, I don't mean to complain because, 2020 was hard for a lot of people, but, like us living in Arizona, the residential world just exploded, whether it was, remodel and people are sitting at home looking at their house, like, what can we do, right? Like, it's time to do these projects, whether it's ourselves or find someone to do them. So it was good for us in that aspect.
Yeah, nice. And you mentioned too, having the commercial background and the residential. Explain to us a bit how that helps you, one in general, being general contractors, but also related a little bit to Hillside Homes. How do those kind of backgrounds help you?
Yeah. So, I mean, construction's construction. You break it up. A lot of people are like, I'm focused on commercial or I'm residential. It's the people and players that change, but the problem solving and all that is very similar. I would say, a lot of what ITS was doing previously in the tension structures and the engineering that went into that plays a huge role stepping into the residential. And when it comes to really like more complex and challenging builds, they were doing everything from 40-foot caissons, in the ground with giant steel coming out of it, compared to just pouring slab on grade and framing up from that. So there's so many things you learn along the way, right? It's like we were talking about our experiences previously. It all feels normal once you get to where you're going, but if you look at the path there, it's a windy road, and there's just you just gather all the information and experience you can along the way and bring that to every new opportunity. And so my residential history was I worked construction during the summers of college. I was a general studies marketing major and, kind of just at college because I didn't know what I want to do, try to figure things out. And my dad was getting some work done at the house. He was building an outdoor living area patio and hired a hardscape contractor. And he's like, "Hey, you need some help this summer?" And, it was like Monday I was showing up there to be a general labor. And I worked a few summers doing that, got really into the hardscape stuff. It was really fun. I loved just, the manual side of it, best shape of my life, but also just the design and working with the clients and all that. And then I went into the tech world. And I want to, we don't need to go too far out on a tangent, but it's just funny because I wasn't sitting there doing that thinking that's what I was going to be doing, throughout my adulthood and into my professional career. But here we are.
Yeah, nice. No, it's good, and it's good
Sorry, what was
sometimes.
the second part of that question? I don't know. I'm trying to.
Oh, it doesn't matter much. It was more about just your background and how that informed and improves your business today. So you touched on it, so that was great.
Good.
The other thing you mentioned, a little bit technical, but it's not bad to get a little technical. You mentioned a caisson, so something maybe in Hillside that you wouldn't see in a regular house. So slab on grade, a flat lot. We're going to take a
Hmm.
concrete slab, we're going to place it on top of the earth. I think most people could understand what that means, but maybe like a caisson or something else. What other terms maybe should a homeowner, before purchasing that land or before jumping into a design, are there some construction terms that apply more to a hillside home than a regular built home?
Yeah. So we've done some, and specifically one job we're working on now is basically like a pedestal system. So yeah, ideally, and even on Hillside, oftentimes, right? It just depends on the designer, the architect you're working with, but they're going to want to cut and fill retaining walls. Eventually, you're going to kind of get to a familiar place of a slab on grade. But we've got a more challenging one right now, which is actually like a pedestal system, which is columns on top of spread footings. So the home ultimately at the end is going to look like it's just basically placed inside this hillside wash versus like we built up the earth around it, kind of built it into it. It's more of like a hovering inside this valley look, which is really easy, but it poses challenges. But the caisson stuff was more for the some of this commercial work. But I know like, there's homes you look at, I mean, I was just looking at the California Palisades and all the awful fires they experienced, but you see what's left from the construction, and a lot of those hillside, beachside homes are built on caissons, so they're basically sitting on cliff sides with nothing holding them up but these concrete cylinders in the ground and whatever structures they come up from.
Yeah,
So other terms, obviously, bedrock is a big one,
yeah,
right? Like the Flintstones. But here in Arizona, I mean, even if you're not from here, you start talking about things. That's inevitably what anyone's going to bring up is like, you got to get your soils report. And even then, you may not get the full story, but you've got the caliche, you've got the granite, you've got, I mean, a lot of these sites are basically rock stone quarries. And so there's often that, but so much of it is the players on your team. You've got to get them early and often, right? Like good architects, like civil engineer, structural engineer, your geotech, grade and drainage, topography maps, all those. I mean, those are just a few things that are popping off the top of my head when the conversation first starts happening with any clients.
yeah, absolutely. And then from our end too, so we'll work, with surveyors, with civil engineers, and all the engineering team. But if we have someone like you engaged early on, it really helps bring the whole thing together. And you bring a special knowledge that we as architects don't have, or structural brings in something that they think of more. So once we get the team in place, especially early, especially with architect and builder, I think that's when we could really create these projects that not only look beautiful in the end, but can we could start planning it from before, the order of things and what an owner can expect. So it's kind of doing an owner a favor by having everyone at the table early.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's something, especially I've heard a lot of from colleagues in the industry. They're really pushing to get your builder on the team as soon as possible. Because oftentimes people are like, I'll just get through the whole design process, then I'll bring the builder in. But the sooner you can have all players in the room working side by side, you're just gonna, at the end of the day, have a more streamlined process. And, we never know the problems we avoid because we avoided them, right? We only know the ones we encounter, but it's just more times than not, it's gonna be advantageous. And that's what's great. Jake, he's not here, but my partner, his background in environmental engineering and architecture has been, a huge help when we work side by side with the structurals, the civils, and, the geotechs and the architects themselves.
Nice. When we sat down last week, you mentioned something that's pretty specific, not just to hillsides, but it happens much more frequently on hillsides. About you talk about bedrock, but about these giant boulders that sometimes you look on the surface, the site looks okay, this might not be so bad. But then you start digging and you encounter these massive boulders. Talk to us about the process of getting rid of a boulder like that.
Well, yeah, I guess boulders are like, people, drive around Arizona, you've got, it looks like, potentially an underwater world, right? Because you've got these perfectly rounded boulders everywhere. Moving those are easy. It's more the granite veins of rock that are underneath the surface, right? So like when you do a soils test, they may not show up because they're only going so far. But when we go to over excavate an area like we did for this project in particular, we've got a pool we're over Xing for because when the pool builder comes in, we'll have already basically, and this is another challenge we can talk about, which is the site and kind of the parameters of working within it. And we had an area was pretty much not going to be accessible except for a little mini excavator for the pool. So we had to over X for that so that when they came in to dig the pool, they're basically just digging in backfill dirt. And same thing with the whole site. But yeah, I mean, we encountered that and we kind of came up with our own, it's not proprietary, but it was just basically through trial and error of a system to basically a non-destructive system to get through a lot of these granite veins, which is basically like if you picture like a buried school bus of just solid rock is what you're dealing with there. We've got 8,000 pound hammer banging on that thing and it's bouncing off of it like, me with a pickaxe. And so we actually used, a lot of manpower and creativity, but using strategic placements of, just hammer drilling in holes, using an expanding epoxy, filling these holes, allowing them to expand over 24 hours. And then you come back and it's like, warm knife through butter and cutting that stuff out. And we'd love to use dynamite in that areas, but if it weren't for the neighbors' consideration, but you're working around homeowners and in neighborhoods. And so another challenge, of the residential world is that, a lot of it has to do with you're really trying to be cognizant of the people in that area. And so, you're banging on rocks for weeks on end and you don't make friends quickly doing that if you're not careful.
Not the
And
best first impression.
another interesting kind of part of the project that came up, which wasn't in the original details, was we actually did some pinning into the granite because there was areas where it was just so solid to go and dig out these areas for footing. So we worked with a structural engineer to actually revise some plans that allowed us to actually drill and dowel into with rebar and pin into these boulders and almost utilize this bedrock as part of the foundation, which is stronger than any, cement you could use because these are, sedimentations that are, I don't know, thousands, millions of years old.
Right.
Um, So it's like everything. You go out with a plan, but you're going to have to, react to real world situations. And so yeah, every job's different, and you just kind of bring those experiences from the past ones up to the next ones, and hopefully you're able to execute.
Yeah, no, and that seems very difficult from your end, just on the business side and speaking with a homeowner, especially when a homeowner, they want to know how much their build is going to cost. And then sometimes you don't really know the answer. So how do you kind of navigate that? Is it's an education thing? How do you just kind of let a homeowner know it's a plus or minus this amount because we don't know yet about site prep, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, just from that line item alone, there's just huge disparities, right? And that's the start of the project. So, I mean, the lumber's cost is going to go up and down, but there's no real crazy challenges when it comes to a lot of the material cost. But that prep work can, there's a huge spread there. And oftentimes you try to build in contingencies for that and you can't always, but ultimately, we're an open book, we're super transparent. So if we're encountering problems in the field, they're going to know immediately. They're going to be notified of those, and we're going to talk through what the pathway forward looks like. But in this, and for instance, on this project, right, like we went in there pretty prepared for what we would see, but also with a plan for what may lie ahead. And luckily, we were within a pretty reasonable margin with this portion of the job, but it's not always the case. And so it's just about communication and it's always in the contract, right? But it's about protecting yourself and the client and ultimately, trying to find where those issues are going to be before they happen. And that's not always the case, but and just kind of having a game plan for that.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And it's good for owners to know that too at the very beginning. So what we could do on our end too, as far as educating, people ask us all the time too, how much is this going to cost? Very difficult question for
Mhm.
us to answer, but we know we know enough to anticipate that there's going with the hillside project that there are certain things that can vary greatly in pricing. And one is often, the driveway. How are we getting to the house? I mean that driveway, could cost $500,000. Um, it could cost 150, right? It could cost different amounts. We don't really know till the end. But
Hmm.
from our design side, we try to, design with the contours in mind, design with the slope of the land in mind, try to make things easier. But yeah, there's still all these unknowns. So it's
Yeah,
good.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a huge challenge of a lot of the desert dwellings, Arizona, hillside is the disturbance areas, right? And it's like, so you're trying to work within a confined space and make it look like you were never really there. The house just kind of showed up. And so working within the contours of that, the disturbance areas, and that's another thing, with our experience is talking through with the client is, there's the nuances with vegetation and you've got plants and things that you're like, oh, I want to incorporate these, but how can I keep them and which ones can we move, which ones can't we? And then just the working with trades and giving them space to work in usually a pretty confined area is another challenge, is just kind of traffic control, right? And for instance, like we have scaffolding 360 degrees on this project, and half of it's is sitting on top of boulders or worked into them. It's not, perfectly flat land. Like if you're working on a commercial building and you got a parking lot all around the building, like, yeah, I can set that scaffolding up. But we've got an awesome scaffolding team we work with who have like, they're great and they're super, super effective with the challenges of whatever, job site we might throw at them. And so it's putting scaffolding up, it's taking it down. It's such a you're like a conductor out there sometimes, right? Working through all those challenges and just trying to be cognizant of the people who are working and the guys who are coming in next. And it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like some of the common themes you're talking about is preparedness. Be prepared.
Hmm.
Have a good team. So you vetted the people that are working with you. Because the more complicated the project, the more it demands precision. So I think having vetted the teams like you guys have, it sounds like you have the right people in the right places. And sounds like, you and Jake kind of you got it down. So pretty awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, we're not perfect, but I mean, yeah, we're we're doing our best, and it's you kind of nailed it there with just preparation is it's all the cliches of the world are true in construction, right? It's like proper planning prevents the other piece, bad performance, and that's all you can do, and then show up. That's 90% of it, showing up, right?
Yeah. And a big one we talked about last week was communication also.
Hmm.
Goes for all of us. It sounds like you hold that in very high esteem too, especially communicating with clients quickly, often, openly about anything that might be happening. That's a huge one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to be a builder in a in a perfect environment where things are going smooth, but that's never the case. We haven't had one of those. I won't say we will, where everything went smooth. But that's where you show your true character, your resiliency, and like your loyalty to a client, because it really is. It's a marriage, another cliche, but especially in the residential side of working with a client from pre-construction all the way to the end. I mean, you're in a marriage basically, and what are the tenets of a good marriage? Communication's a big one, and it's the same thing. And you're going to have your turbulent times, but it's like sticking by their side, you know presenting the facts even when they may not make you look good is a big thing, because people can only do with what the information they have. And so you know that's a key thing, and it's hard, but it's important.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I think this was great. I think people on the site will really appreciate it. I learned something. So, Mike, thank you very
Good.
much. Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. It's a good day. That means you're done for the day. If you learn one new thing a day, you're better off.
that's
Yeah,
right.
man, it's great. And I love what you're doing. I think, we'll use it as a resource. I've looked, the videos you've already prepared, the interviews with other folks. It's awesome. And that's the one thing I really like from, seeing the industry in Arizona where it's going. It's a lot more collaborative over competitive. there's people that are willing to help, even if they're your competition down the street. And we strive to be that way as well. So we always tell clients, it's like at the end of the day, even if you don't choose us, you can always reach out. We'll help you through the problems or whatever we can do. We're here to help. And same with you and any of your colleagues. So it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mike. Yeah, thank you very much.